Okay, good evening everybody, and welcome to part 3 of Finding Your Path, the Path of the Just, Rabbi Moshe Chaim Luzatto. I just want to say that even though this is part 3, but I hope to make each of these shirim self-contained. So if you've seen the other parts, great, and if you haven't, I hope you'll still get something out from this section. Last week, actually, it was the week before last, the last shir we gave on this, we left off with the question. Let me just outline the question. Mesilat Yesharim says that a person is placed into a situation of, into the middle of a strong war, a milchama. And on the one hand, there's the nisayon, the challenge of poverty. And the other hand, there's the challenge of riches. Now, to a lot of people, being wealthy isn't a challenge at all. But it's the problem with being poor is obvious. That's what he calls the nisayon, the challenge which is revealed, because a person who's poor is very tempted to steal. He looks at his children, they're hungry. What am I supposed to do? So that's a big challenge. The other challenge is the challenge that he calls the challenge which comes from behind, so to speak, the challenge which is not really so much revealed, which is that of wealth. Why is wealth a challenge? When a person's wealthy, he tends to think that he did it himself. It's very easy for him to forget that everything is coming from Hashem. You know, it's sort of fairly logical and understandable that when a person who's very nice looking looks in the mirror and says, wow, I mean, that's pretty stupid, because not only did Hashem give you a face, but He gave you a nice face. So you have more to say thank you to Hashem for. But people don't seem to apply this kind of logic so much when it refers to their intelligence. A person somehow thinks that he's smart and he figured out a way to make a better mousetrap. Who put the idea into your mind in the first place? Just as looks, good looks, is a gift, an extra gift from Hashem. So not only do you have a mind, you have a good mind. You may have a great mind. You may have a brilliant mind. More to say thank you to Hashem for. So that's a challenge, because when a person's successful, he tends to think that, the self-made man. You've all heard of the self-made man. There's no such thing. The self-made man is rarer than the Himalayan Yeti. Doesn't exist. Nobody's ever seen a self-made man. Nobody makes themselves. People say, I got up at 5 o'clock every morning and I worked all day. So I know people who got up at 4 o'clock in the morning and were unsuccessful. Getting up early in the morning, working hard, being brilliant is no recipe for success. There's a famous story about a rich businessman. Somebody asked him, how come you were so, what do you put your success down to? So he said, 80% mazel, luck, and 20% seichel, intelligence. And if I'd had little less seichel, I'd have done even better. Just because you're bright doesn't mean you're going to be successful. So these are the two challenges that a person's faced in this world. The challenge of poverty and the challenge of b'kochi va'otzem yodi. With my own power and my own right hand did I make all this wealth and success. And he says that, so as he says, Vashalva mitzad echad, tranquility, repose from one side, and from the other side, this idea of having to fight this battle from either side, also the side of poverty and the side of riches. Now, if a person succeeds, he vanquishes these two battles, he is what's called the Odom HaSholem. He is called the perfected man, who will merit to become close, to be dovik with HaKadosh Baruch Hu in Olam Haba. And he'll emerge from this prosdor, from this corridor. This world is considered like an antechamber. And he will emerge into the palace to be radiated, to be saturated with light of the light of life. Now clearly this is some form, a Kabbalistic idea, which is represented as being irradiated by this light of life, suffused with this light of life. Now, what we stopped off with last week was as follows: Kufi Ashir, and according to the amount, Asher Kovash Es Yitzro, that he manages to dominate his negative drive, his Yetzer Hara, his desire to, whatever those desires are, his fleshly desires, his desires for repose, to indulge in whatever it is, in food, in taivos noshim, v'ta'avosov, as we spend, and his physical desires. So, to the extent that he conquers those, v'nisrachek min ha'marchikim oisoi mehatov, and he distances himself from those things that distance him from Hashem, v'nishtadel ledovek boy, and he tries his best to attach himself to Hashem through, so Cain yasigehu, to that extent will he reach it. He will reach that tachlis of being Odom HaShalem, the perfected man, v'yismach bo, and he will be glad with it. Now, what we stopped on last week is, so as we said last couple of weeks ago, we said before that there are two things here. Clearly, a person is kovish his taivos, he conquers his Yetzer Hara. That's talking about mitzvahs lo saseh, negative mitzvahs as they're called. Don't do mitzvahs. So to the extent that he manages to succeed in that, and he, mishtadel ledovek bo, and he works hard to attach himself to Hashem, that's mitzvahs aseh. Yes?
What's that term for perfected man?
The Hebrew?
Yes.
Odom HaShalem. I don't really know how to translate. Literally it means the perfect man, but I would prefer to say the perfected man, the person who perfects himself as much as it's possible for a physical person to be perfect. So according to the degree that he conquers his taivos, subdues his Yetzer Hara, and attaches himself to Hashem through doing mitzvahs, aseh, positive mitzvahs, so Cain Yisageu, to that extent he will reach to this aspiration of the perfected man, v'yismach bo, and he will be, he'll be happy with that achievement. I wasn't quite sure what the difference is. He's going to achieve this perfection and he's going to be happy with it. So I think actually, I'm just thinking now off the top of my head, there's a phrase in the Torah which talks about the brachot and the klalot, the blessings and the curses, that the Torah describes, the blessings for keeping the Torah and the curses for not keeping the Torah. And it says after each one of these, each one of the bracha and each one of the klalas, v'yasigehu. Same word over here. The yasig, it means to, it's a difficult word to translate into English, to reach or to, means to hasagot in our perceptions, concepts. Le'asig something is to reach something, to understand something in terms of thought. But in all of these brachot and klalot, it says afterwards, this bracha is going to happen v'yasigehu, and it's going to reach you. So what does it mean that you have the bracha and it's going to reach you? So I saw one of the Meforshim explain that a person can have a bracha, he can have a tremendous blessing in his life. But to understand that he has the blessing is also a blessing in itself. It's a separate blessing. To appreciate what a person has, to appreciate what we have. A person can be surrounded by blessings, and unfortunately he can be unaware of them. So it's a separate blessing in itself, a separate bracha in itself, that ecology Baruch Hu allows a person to realize. And on the other side as well, chas v'chalila, that it's bad enough to have a curse, to have something very difficult, but if a person really feels that difficulty, that curse, that distance from Hashem, whatever the problem, Rahman al-Islam, or the tragedy, God forbid, it's another stage, more serious stage of the curse, of the punishment, to feel it. To feel it in your, they say, in your kishkas. a bracha. So that's what I wanted to say here. Maybe that's what he wanted to say. Yishtadel ladovik bo kein yasigehu, to that extent that a person conquers his Yetzer Hara, distances himself from things that distance him from Hashem, does the mitzvahs aseh, which draws him close to Hashem, which surrounds him with holiness, brings him close to Hashem. To the extent that he does that, so he'll reach that status, and he'll be happy with it. So I wanted to say that's another bracha. Not only will he reach this closeness to Hashem, but he will be happy with it. He'll understand it. It'll penetrate into his perception to the greatest degree. Now, I always thought this was a little bit kind of frightening in a way, because it means that if you don't do the max, if you don't get there, then you're not going to have the maximum, so to speak, connection with Hashem. You won't achieve that. So I saw that Rav Dov Segel, Shlita, says an amazing idea. The idea, he says as follows. In Shamayim, they don't judge a person whether he stumbled in an Aveira, he did a sin, or he didn't do a sin. Rather, even if he did do this sin, as we all do, we all stumble, we all make mistakes, we all fall down, and he went after his Yetzer Hara, he followed his Yetzer Hara, whatever it was that he did, without going into details, I don't know. He found himself, as is all too easy today, to find himself looking at something he shouldn't be looking on his phone. That doesn't eradicate all the good times, all the times that he controlled himself in the past. That doesn't mean that he's now got the status of a Rasha. All of those previous times that he was able to resist that particular temptation, all of those things that he was able to be strong and beat them, and in other words, kafi ashir, according to the amount that he's able to kavesh his Yetzro, kein yasigehu, to that extent will HaKadosh Baruch Hu will, Hashem will be, he will reach that connection to Hashem, and Hashem will be happy with him for the times that he was able to resist. In other words, the idea is that a person has a big Yetzer Hara. The Yetzer Hara comes and wants to trip a person up. And then what does the Yetzer Hara say afterwards? There, you see, who are you? Look at you. You think you can do tshuva? In other words, the Yetzer Hara wants to come as a tzaddik and say, who are you? This is the biggest mistake a person can make. This is the thing that is the real killer. That a HaKadosh Baruch Hu will connect with the person and doesn't look at him as somebody who's, okay, you fell down. Sheva, the tzaddik falls down 7 times and he gets up again. And the Rasha falls down once and he stays down. A tzaddik is somebody who says, I'm not perfect, and he doesn't listen to his Yetzer Hara to say, who do you think you are? You see, you've tried time and time again, and every time you fail. Yeah, but I didn't fail all the time. And the HaKadosh Baruch Hu connects to a person in his successes, and Yismach Boi, that the HaKadosh Baruch Hu is happy with him for the times he's successful. Completely opposite of the way we were learning before. Even if he falls down, even if he goes after his Yetzer Hara, he's not being judged on that alone, he's being judged for all of the successes he has. My Rebbe always says, in Ruchnius, in spirituality, even a little is a lot. It may be, that you just manage to make yourself a little bit better from one Rosh Hashanah to another. We've all had the feeling, standing there on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur and clapping Al Chet, and we know that within a couple of days sometimes, that we go back to our own ways. So, what was all that about? The answer is no, that even if you manage to make yourself a little bit better, and even if you don't hold on that level, whatever that occasion was, you stopped yourself doing that Avera even one time, that is a tremendous thing. And when a person understands that, then that will give him encouragement to carry on and try again. It says, the Shah had the most low nishla voice. The gate of tears in heaven, there are many gates in heaven. One of the gates in heaven are something called the gate of tears. All the gates of heaven now are locked, except for the gate of tears. The gate of tears is always open. So the Kotzker Rebbe, I think it's the Kotzker, says if the gate of tears is never locked, it's always open, why does it need a gate? So he says there is actually one time that the gate of tears closes, and that are the tears of despair. The tears when a person gives up. He gives up on himself, he gives up on Hashem. Tears of Yeush. That is something that is the biggest Yetzer Hara. That destroys a person. When a person feels, I can't do it anymore, I can't, there's nothing to be done, I'm lost, there's no way, I give up. A person can cry his eyes out about all the things he's done wrong, and his tears go straight to Shamayim. But if those tears are tears of despair, he doesn't believe that Hashem will forgive him. He doesn't believe he can ever be close to Hashem. And in the end, what happens is when a person thinks like that, he starts to deny Hashem. He doesn't want any relationship with Hashem. He cuts Hashem out of his life. So that's when the gate of tears on Nishlavot, they close. But this is a wonderful thing here, that if you think about it, it's a tremendous opportunity that a person has. Okay, I messed up. I really messed up big time. I did something I should never have done. Whatever it was, without going into details. And we're in a generation where there are tremendous temptations, in the 30s and 40s, before that actually, the turn of the century, where all these ideas of revolutionary political ideas, communism, Zionism, the world was swept with ideas, and the yeshivas in Europe emptied out. Such was the attraction of these new secular philosophies. I mean, you have to remember that communism in its early day was something which seemed so amazing, and it's not by coincidence so many of the original communists were Jews. And of course, when communism and Stalinism revealed the great evil of communism, how it basically degenerated into something which was absolutely murderous and unfair and in the extreme, and inefficient and counterproductive, and went against all human emotion. But at the beginning it looked very, very attractive, and the yeshivas emptied out with, people wanted to become communists and Zionists and taking on all of these things. Nowadays, nobody's really interested in ideas anymore. Nobody's going to go and run off for an idea. What's taken over now, as Bilam cursed us with, are the Banot Moav, the daughters of Moab. Pritzut, immorality, pornography. These are the challenges that are faced nowadays. These are the things that a person can fall down in. And it's unfortunately so accessible, which makes it so dangerous, so much of a challenge. But a person, even if he falls down, the worst thing he can do is to think, I've had it. This is who I am. That is not who you are. He brings a mashal here of, there's this huge department store in this town, and this department store has absolutely everything, and its prices are cheaper than everybody else. Now, you are the owner of a small little hardware store, and so what do? Because there's this huge department store where they have everything, and you don't, you have a few bits and pieces. What are you going to do? You're going to close down? No. Okay, maybe you're not going to make a fortune, but you're going to make a living. So nobody closes down his own little hardware store just because there's a big store down the street. True, he'll get 90% of the business, 98% of the business. But still, if you've got 2%, you're still in business. And that's what a Jew has to realize. I'm still in business. I'm still functioning. I'm still trying. And when a person thinks like that and he has that positive attitude, he'll see that even the Averas that he did in the past, and they could be very serious Averas. I'm not saying that I'm saying that optimism, that feeling of hope, that trust in Hashem, that Hashem will forgive me, and I'm going to try. I try my best, and you know something, I may fall down again, but right now I'm determined to do my absolute best. So that is something which is a tremendous bracha, that Hashem accepts all the good things we did and all the bad things we do, does not obliterate them. That is not who you are. That is not who you are. So, this is, I think, a beautiful explanation. Kein yisagehu v'yismach boi. That Hashem will be happy in a person to the extent that he manages to achieve this closeness with Hashem, even if that closeness is not in any way perfect, is severely lacking. But nevertheless, Hashem looks at a person and he sees the things that he does good, he sees what he's trying to do, and he accepts that. And that's on what he's judged. Okay, so now let's move on. The next part of what we want to talk about tonight is what I call Jewish ecology. There's a lot of talk nowadays about ecology, about the ecosystem. Scientists seem to be, we've gone through periods of very violent climate change, records being broken in terms of heat, rainfall, storms. And we're going to see here from what the Mesilat Yesharim says that in point of fact, all of these natural phenomena are in point of fact stem from our actions. And let me read what he says here and then I'll explain how I believe that fits into what he's saying. The im ta'amig oid, if you look further, be'inyan into the matter, tirei, you'll see, ki ha'olam nivra l'shimush ha'odam. This world was created for one reason and one reason only, as we spoke in previous weeks. This world was created for a being called man, who would choose, who would be the recipient of God's goodness, and he would receive this goodness in the best possible way by choosing to do God's will, which means there has to be the potential to not do God's will in order that the choice is a real choice. So everything in the world is created for man as a backdrop to man to make this choice. There's everything in this world. Ki tamik ba'oid be'inyan tireh ki ha'olam nivra is created l'shimush ha'odam. One purpose and one purpose only, to serve man. Now you'll say to me, well, hang on a second, how does some undiscovered species of salamander in the Amazon basin impact what my choices to do the mitzvahs or not do the mitzvahs? How is that helping me serve Hashem? The answer is I can't tell you, but that's how it has. That's the axiom. It has to be that way, because the alternative is as follows: if we're going to say that the whole world was created to serve man, and there are vast swaths of the world, vast parts of the world which really have no influence and have no part in this function to serve man, then it would be to accuse the Ribbono Shel Olam, God forbid, of tremendous sloppiness. That, you know something, when he created this world, there were these vast areas which are not really necessary for the world. That's axiomatically impossible. It's not possible. If the world was created to serve man, and that's the only purpose of the world, then it must be everything in this world has a way of serving man. Do I understand that chain of events? Do I understand how that salamander in the Amazon basin impacts on that ability to serve man? No, I've no idea. But that's what we have to say. There's an interesting Rambam he has in the beginning of the Perishai Mishnayos, his explanation on the Mishnah, which describes, I'll give you a very similar mashal. It's not exactly the mashal he says, but there's an idea that there's a Jew who one day is traveling through a foreign kingdom, and it's very, very hot. And he shades in this tree for a few minutes, get out of the sun, of the heat of the sun, which is killing him. And there's a river which is an ornamental stream, and which he takes some water from. He quenches his thirst, he rests there for a few hours, and he carries on. Now this ornamental tree was planted in the 3rd dynasty of this particular kingdom, which has been going back for hundreds, maybe 1,000 years, different kings coming and going, castles being built and destroyed, and trees being planted, and rivers, little ornamental streams. It comes out that all of this vast history of this particular kingdom was there for one reason and one reason only, that this Jew should have 2 hours, 3 hours of peace, tranquility, calm, and water. That's the whole reason for its creation. You see, we tend to think, we look at things in terms of difficulty and ease, how difficult it is to do something, how easy it is to do something. To Hashem, there's no such thing as difficult or easy. If it means that He's going to create an entire dynasty, and dynasties, and plant hundreds of fruit trees and castles and turrets and servants and kings, just so that there should be this setup where this Jew should be able to derive the sustenance and this protection from the heat, and then that's fine. It's not that it's more difficult or more easy. Everything is equally easy or difficult for Hashem. So the words don't mean anything. So we have to understand everything He says is created to serve man. Omnam hu oimed b'shikol gadol, but man himself stands in a great balance. Ki ima adam nimshach acha oilam, because even though the world is created entirely for man, but if a man is drawn after the world, in other words, rather than use the world, he allows the world to use him, to draw him away, and the master becomes the slave, and the slave becomes the master. If a person is drawn after the world, and misrachek miboiro, and as a result of that, he is drawn away from Hashem. Why? Because when a person fails to understand that the world is there to aid him in his service of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and he's drawn after all of the wonderful things there are in this world, which can be very distracting and very alluring, then automatically, of course, he becomes distant from Hashem. Because Hashem's purpose is revealed in this world in order that it should serve man, in order that man should serve Hashem. So by distorting the purpose of the world, automatically he then leaves the track. He's now no longer on the same lines as the design of Hashem when He created the world. So then what happens is, now this is very interesting, Hinei hu miskalkel. Man becomes destroyed, ruined by this. And again, even though the world was put here for man's service, but if he's drawn after the world, that is not in line with what Hashem wanted, and as a result of that, that destroys man. Now listen to this. Umakalkel ha'olam imoy. A man destroys the world with him. What does that mean? He destroys the world with him. We'll come back to that. V'im hu sholeit ba'atzmo. But if he controls himself, v'nidbak b'avoiro, and he cleaves to Hashem. Again, the same idea. If he controls himself, mitzvahs lo saseh. V'nidbak b'avoiro, and he cleaves to Hashem, that's mitzvahs aseh. Torah, tefillin, Shabbos, whatever it is. Umishtamish min ha'olam, and he uses from this world, rak lios lo l'siyur la'avodas boiro, and he takes from this world. He uses this world only to the extent that it helps him to serve Hashem. Hu mis'ale, then he becomes elevated. Va'olam atzmo mis'ale imo, and the world becomes elevated with him. Let's give a practical example of this. He becomes elevated because why? He's now using the world in the way it was supposed to be used. The world is now used, shimush, the world is being used. He's used the world to elevate himself, which is why the world was put here. But the interesting thing here is the world also becomes elevated with him. Here's the example. This table here in front of us. Now I'm guessing this table probably came out of a factory somewhere near Tel Aviv. And this table is probably one of many thousands like it. This table ended up in Or Samech, where rabbis are teaching Torah on it every day. People are learning Torah every day. People are serving Hashem with it every day. There is a table which looks identical to this table, which ended up in some cafe where people meet every day and speak Lashon Hara, and let's say, God forbid, are eating in some treif restaurant, and they're serving up all kinds of treifins being eaten on that table. Two identical tables, at least they started off as identical. What the Mesilat Yesharim is saying is that even though they look the same, these are physically different tables. You can't see it, but the whole composition of this table is entirely different from the table that ended up in that coffee bar in North Tel Aviv. That's what I call Jewish ecology. Meaning, when we use the world as it should be used to serve us in our service of Hashem, that doesn't only just elevate us, because that's what the world's put here for, is for us to use it to elevate ourselves. And we take from the world only the things that we need. I'll come back to that in a second. But also, that's a great elevation for the world itself. Everything in the world. And so when we look at all the climate change and everything in the world, so that should give us pause. Maybe we're not using the world in the correct way. And that's why maybe the world in itself is coming apart at the seams. As he says, Ki hine ilui gadolhu, lebrios kulam biyosam mishamesh ha'odam hasholim b'kedusha hamakudash b'kedusha so yisborach. Because it is a great elevation for everything created in this world, in its service of the perfected man, who has been sanctified with the sanctity of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. V'hu ke'inyan ma she'omru chachmeinu zichron levracha, that's what Chazal taught us, be'inyan ha'or she'genozu HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the or sameach. That's what we're talking about. The light that was hidden away from by HaKadosh Baruch Hu, for the tzaddikim. And it says, v'zeh lashonam, that's what it says in Chagiga, in the Gemara Chagiga, v'kivin shera ha'or, and seeing, the light saw that it was hidden, shegonzu HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that Hashem hid it, for the tzaddikim, somach, it was happy. Shenama, as it says in Mishlei, or tzaddikim yismach. This is where the name of the yeshiva comes from. What's going on over here? So the idea is as follows. When it says at the beginning of the Torah, Vayhi or, let there be light. The light that shone at the beginning of the world was not the sun and the moon and the stars and the firmament, because that was created on the third day. It says that Hashem created the moon and the stars and all the constellations. So what was this light, Vayhi or, which is right at the beginning of the Torah? Our sages teach us at the beginning of the creation there was a supernal light called the Or. It's called the Or HaGanuz, the hidden light. Why was it hidden? We'll find in a moment. But this light was a light which it says you could see from one end of the world to the other. That doesn't mean that the light was bright or super bright. It means that with this light you could see cause and effect. You could see from one end of the world to the other. Now clearly this is something extremely powerful. And Hashem saw that the Rishoyim, with such a light in the world, could do extremely destructive things when you see how cause and effect work. And so he hid it away. He hid it away for the tzaddikim for the time to come. That's why it's called the Or HaGanuz. And the light was happy when it saw it was hidden away, because it understood that it wouldn't be used by the Rishoyim. It wouldn't be destroyed. That's the example of what he's giving here, the idea of how the physical world itself can be elevated or chas v'chalila degraded in the way that it's used. Another example is Yaakov Avinu. By Yaakov Avinu it says, "V'sam mei rosh Yosef," he's put the stones around his head. Shalokach Yaakov Avinu, v'sam rosh Yosef Omru Omar Rabbi Yitzchak. It says in Chulin, Melamed sheniskabtzu kulon l'mokom echad. If you look in the Torah over there, it talks about how Yaakov Avinu took from Avnei Hamokom, the stones of the place. And when he woke up the following morning, it says the stone in the singular. So what happened? How did all these stones become one stone? The idea is that they were so keen, so to speak. Each one said, Chazal teaches, Olai Yoniach Rosho Tzel Tzadik, that the head of the tzaddik should rest on me. And in this tremendous desire to be used by Yaakov Avinu, as they knew a tremendous elevation it would be for them, so they became fused into one. As it says, Olai Yoniach Tzadik Rosho, V'hinei. Right, and another third idea over here is Hinei Hala'ika Hazer Heirun Zichron L'Rocha. This idea that Chazal enlightened us also in Koheles. It says Re'ei es Maaseh Ha'olakim, that Kodesh Baruch Hu took out of Adam Arishon. He says over here that Adam Arishon was taken by Hashem throughout all of the Gan Eden, and he took him and he showed him all of the Gan, and he said to him, Rei Ma'asai, see my actions, see what I've done here. Come and na'im, u'mushubochim, how wonderful they are, how great they are. V'chol ma shebarasi bishvilcha barasi. Everything I created for you, for man. Tein daitecha, be careful. Shelo tekalkel, do not destroy, v'tachriv, and lay waste, esolami, my world. This is what we call Jewish ecology. That when we use the world in the correct way, we elevate ourselves, and the world is elevated along with us. I think we'll leave it here, and next week, Bezrat Hashem, we'll carry on. All the best.